Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming to the webinar. We're just going to give everyone just another 30 seconds or so to join. You can see people joining the group. We'll just wait a little bit and then we will start. Okay. I think we have a pretty good group here. So why don't we get started and people can join as we go. So welcome everyone to the conversation today. Thank you for being here. We are going to be discussing the why behind the breakdown of workforce plans, because even the strongest and most carefully built plans can often break, probably for numerous and different factors, and the result can be a lot of reactive firefighting. So we are hoping to share some great insights with you and some real life examples from our panel here that can help you find some really successful ways to close the gap between planning and the execution of the plan. So hopefully when you walk away from this webinar, you'll have some great tips from our experts that are going to help you in your journey. So in terms of who we have with us today, we have two great WFM experts who have many, many years of experience in the industry who are going to share their thoughts with us today. We have Mark Alpern here, who is the co-founder and CEO with us here at Cinareo, who has over 30 years of experience in the contact center world. So welcome, Mark. And we also have a fabulous guest speaker with us today as well, Daniel Piper, who is extremely experienced consultant in the space, specialist in transforming contact center operations. So welcome, Daniel. Thank you both for being here and sharing your experience. Thank you. We're looking forward to hearing all about your tips and tricks and your experience with everyone on the call. So thank you very much. So just a quick overview of our agenda. So our agenda today is going to cover 4 key areas. We will be talking about the hidden costs of poor data, because many times the cost of bad data is not really truly understood. We're also going to be talking about the why behind failing forecasts, why even the strongest forecasts can break. We will also be discussing how best to align planning with operational reality, exposing gaps in execution and ways that we can potentially mitigate them. And lastly, we're going to talk about the importance behind the numbers. So being driven by ROI to arm decision makers with numbers that can actually be trusted. So even if you are a highly skilled and experienced planner, you probably know that even good models can break down. So hopefully this session will leave you with some great insights that you can put into action. So to kick us off, we are going to start with an exciting poll. And this poll, we want to know what your biggest workforce planning headache is right now. So you'll see a poll pop up on your screen. And what we would love is for you to answer. I think there's going to be 4 choices to the poll. And we really, really want to understand what your biggest workforce planning headache is right now.
Daniel, what do you think? What's the bet?
I think it'll be leadership, not trust in the numbers.
I think it's going to be inconsistent or unreliable data. We will see.
We'll see who's going to win.
The battle begins.
Maybe there'll be an equal number. You never know. So yes, if everyone can look at the 4 options on the screen and pick what is your biggest headache right now. And we'll see whether Mark or Daniel is correct, or maybe neither of them. So, or if you have more than one, it might be hard to choose. I'm sure people have more than one pain point in their operations, but it'll be interesting to see the results. Okay, look at that.
Okay. Close.
I should have put a wager on this.
You pipped me. Just about.
We were 40%. We're neck and neck, Daniel. Very clearly.
So guys, does this make sense to you? The results?
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, so you're very close in the terms of the first and the last one. Those are the 2 main pain points, but you can see that there's people that have pain points in all 4 areas. I am not surprised that, and I'm sure people would have picked more than one as well.
I think they're very much interrelated in many respects, right? So we're going to talk a lot about that as we go through today's session.
Exactly.
And maybe next time we need to put an all of the above selection.
There we go, Daniel.
Exactly, and all the good idea. Okay, so let's launch into our very first question, which is, what happens when workforce planning relies on inconsistent or poor quality data? What hidden costs do leaders often overlook? So Daniel, I'm going to go to you first to see what your answer is to this question.
No worries. So, for me, the whole point of WFM is to predict what you need to serve customers properly. Bad data leads to poor predictions. That can either lead your contact center offering as being too cheap, so you're not serving people to their expectations, or alternatively, you can have the best in class and be far too expensive to serve. And ultimately, the biggest or one of the big costs that there is customer trust erodes if you don't get your data right, and they don't get the service that they expect to see and receive. But I think as well, over and above all of that, when you've got poor data, it's very, very difficult to put your finger on what the cause is, especially when you've built your operation over many, many years and you've added new lines of business in and you've not properly sized each of the components properly, or you've struggled with blending the activity. Where do you actually start to put your finger on the part that's causing you the pain? Um, and I think I've used the analogy in the past, because I've gone into many, many contact centers over the years. We've struggled with service level performance, and the execs are just saying, well, just put it right, just put it right. But what I found when going in is just everything's been blended without having the understanding of what each core component should be and how it should be sized. And I use the cables in a drawer analogy, right? Because everyone's got one. You just you open the drawer and you've got cables dating back from the dawn of cables, and you will never ever use them again. But when that one situation comes up and you're asked, "Oh, can you tell me how this particular problem gets solved?" You go into the drawer and you start pulling cables out all over the place. And when you grab one, the whole contents of the drawer comes out, and it's just chaos. It's a complete mess.
Absolutely.
I mean, ultimately, it's really, really important to focus on getting your data right. Understand what you need to serve that customer channel, and then start to build a case for blending your workforce, but only once you're at the place of stability. And if you're not in a place of stability, please don't go in chucking more and more lines of business into the equation, because it just makes your problem so much more difficult to solve for.
Adding
That's
more
very,
cables to the drawer.
there we go.
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be cables, it can be any old junk, right?
Yeah.
But everyone's got one.
Everyone has a junk drawer. Everyone. Mark, what would you like to add to this? Anything?
So, yeah, there's a couple of things that I want to add
Okay.
from two perspectives. One is I think we can all agree that bad data at the front end leads to bad outcomes, right? Failing to plan is planning to fail. Failing to plan right is planning to fail as well, right? You can result, bad planning, bad forecasting can result in over or understaffing, missed service levels, financial unpredictability. This is
Mark, I'm
not.
going to interrupt you for a second because your voice is too low. Your mic might be too low.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Much better. Yes, thank you.
Okay, no problem. So I think the other piece that I think we need to really think about is that we shouldn't just be looking at historical data when we're planning forward, right? It's important to look at historicals for sure, understand seasonality, variations in volume, average handle time, et cetera. But it's also important to work with your stakeholders to understand what's going to change in the landscape so that you can use historical data, but always plan forward, understanding what might change in the future. And I think one other point that I really need to hit home on is that when we talk about poor data and forecasting, it's not just about forecasting the volume. We're talking about forecasting everything. We're talking about forecasting average handle time, shrinkage, attrition, even the new hire learning curve of agents. Right? Being able to better understand, because the more insights, the more data you have about how your agents perform, how your customers are going to be interacting with you across multiple channels, the better a plan you're going to have.
And I know, Mark, the phrase you always say is always look forward and not back, right? So you can't just rely on your historical data. You have to have a lens looking forward to see what might be changing and not just rely on what's happened in the past.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's move on to our second question, which is that forecasts often look extremely fine on paper, yet things still break down. So I want to ask both of you why you think even really, really skilled planners with really, really good models might still run into trouble with this. So Daniel, any thoughts?
So I see this more often than not because
Mm,
clearly with consultancy, people only bring consultants in when things are at a loss or failing. All too often, when I first engage with clients, they say the planning process is broken, right? And the
mm,
blame goes straight to the planning function or the
mhm,
WFM function overall, without truly understanding what is ultimately driving the failure of this, right?
mhm,
Because I've gone in and I've looked at operations and I've seen that the forecasts have come in exactly as have been planned, right? The shifts have been built in order to meet the requirements of the forecast. And when you start peeling back the layers of the onion, you actually, on occasion, and probably more often than not, it's down to an adherence to plan
mhm,
problem from what I've seen. And because if you put all the effort, all the right effort into building a proper forecast, from the forecast you build a, a capacity plan model, you build an optimal forecast, you even plan in all of the necessary shrinking within that schedule, and then because the operations team didn't necessarily believe the plan or they
mhm,
didn't utilize the tools that they had available to them, you then look at the schedule adherence and you see sometimes it's as low as 45%. So then
mhm,
I ask myself the question, and I ask the executive teams, why have you even got a planning function if
mhm.
your operational
Not going to use it.
teams are not
Yeah.
are not going to follow it? Because it can
Yeah.
be the best and most amazing plan out there, but the only way you can truly attribute issues to the planning and forecasting process is if the operational team are following the plan exactly as has been prescribed, give or take very small variants, and the plan or the forecast is still failing. Then you can look at the planning process overall.
So Daniel, I think you're spot on. I always refer to contact center operations as a team sport, right? It is
Mm,
not just workforce management's responsibility to come up with the best forecast, the best plan, the best schedule, etc. But it really requires uh, operations, the team leaders, the agents themselves, operations floor management to work in concert with the workforce management team to affect the best outcome. I think many planners equate forecast accuracy with planning success, but we all know, again, if we go back to the analogy of a team sport, it is not just one person or one group's responsibility. It takes a village, a community to really execute a plan flawlessly. I think the one other thing that is relevant in this case is the time horizon for planning, right? And to me, planning is not a once and done. It's not a once a year type of
mm,
event, right? It goes in cycles. You have your annual long-term planning cycle for resource planning, for budgeting, even for strategic initiatives, whether it's technology investment, process improvement, and the like. You've got midterm planning for recruitment and training planning, giving yourself enough runway, 3 to 6 months, let's say, to make sure that you're hiring ahead of attrition, giving yourself plenty of time to get the resources you need to achieve your service level objectives. And then short-term planning for pre-scheduled production, right? So whether it's a week, 2 weeks, even 12 weeks in advance, you're refining that forecast, not just the volume again, but all the other associated data inputs to ensure that you've got the most accurate plan possible. You may start at the beginning of the year at 85% accuracy, but by the time it comes to the short-term planning horizon, you've got a lot more line of sight. The closer you are to the time of production, the more insight you've got.
And
So I'm very,
let's also add to that. Sorry, Karen, once
no, go
again,
ahead.
we have to ask ourselves, was everything factored in, right? Because a lot of the
Mm,
time, the planning teams, although they should be the strategic enabler for any contact center operation and even the business, they're left out of crucial conversations. So they're not put or treated
mm,
as part of the strategic function that they should be acted in. They're almost just treated as, can you put some bums on seats, please, without actually understanding what is actually in the pipeline. Was everything factored in? Do we even train the WFM staff? Because invariably, many WFM people were agents that went into real time, which went into workforce managers, and not enough investment is put in developing workforce management personnel in many organizations that I go into. And propensity to call ratios, are these even factored in? Customer contact ratios, same piece. Outbound call ratios, has everything been factored into this plan that should be factored in? And do the planning teams know that they should be factoring these things in? Um,
So
sorry, Karen, Mark.
no, I was going to say, I think you're hitting on a key point that, throughout our consulting career, Karen and mine, is that standard operating procedures are absolutely key. Standard operating procedures specifically for workforce management and operations as a whole, right? And by having such documented standard operating procedures, you can uh, mitigate many of the challenges that you're talking about. You know the data that you need. You know where to source the data. You develop your sources of the truth, right? And you gain confidence in that as well as the processes. When things break down, when service level goes off the rails, either higher or lower, what are the levers that I can pull? Right. And these types of things can be documented. And so it's like a playbook, if you will, right?
exactly. Yep.
Of
Exactly.
game day.
Yep. Good point. And I think another key thing that I think you mentioned when you talked about it being a team sport, breaking down those silos, extremely important, I think, as well. So let's jump into another poll. And in this poll, we want to know in your organization, where do workforce plans most often break down? And we're going to see where, if there's a trend or a pattern into where these plans actually break down. And again, I'm going to go to you, Daniel, you and Mark, and get your thoughts before we see the results and what you think the answer is.
Ooh.
I'm going to say intraday management and execution.
I'm going to go with Mark. Not, I,
Oh, you,
I would,
you
I would
agree?
love to
You
disagree.
It's
agree?
never workforce management.
I would love to disagree, but it's going to make for really boring TV because I'm agreeing with Mark.
So you both agree this time. Interesting. So there's not going to be a debate. Well, let's see if you are correct in what you think. And if anyone answers other, I'm going to want to ask what the other is. So be warned if
Yes.
you answer that way. I guess we had a gateway to another answer there in case something else wasn't on this list. But you guys think intraday management execution.
Yeah.
We just finished talking about how the best laid plans,
I know, best laid plans might go
because
awry.
workforce
So
management people are wonderful, perfect. They know what they're doing. They live and breathe numbers.
oh, look at that. You guys knew. Oh, you know what? And one person answered other. Okay. So while we're continuing through this webinar, I'm hoping that the person that answered other will put in the chat what the other is so we can discuss it in the Q&A. Very interesting. Okay. So let's move on to the next question, which is that many organizations blame the plan, as you've been talking about, when the service levels slip. So where do you see those gaps show up most often, and how can planning and execution be better aligned? So Daniel, you've said the bigger issue is the execution. So where do you see those gaps show up most often?
So the vast majority of my time in contact centers has been in operations, right? And I think I come from a very different school of workforce management and contact center operations, which goes back many years. But strangely, I don't think I've ever blamed WFM for what has happened. Ultimately, as the operational owner, I always took full responsibility around why performance had not hit, because for me, WFM has a place in the strategic, long-term, mid-term, and short-term planning process and the whole scheduling aspect of things. But the day zero execution has to be owned by the operational delivery teams. Only through that operational ownership piece will the WFM team and the operations team work as one unit. Because to the earlier points around the whole silo piece, you can't operate in silos. And you know the second you move into that silo operation is because everyone starts blaming everybody else and nobody starts taking accountability for what they should be owning. Now, the first thing that I would do if service wasn't achieved, I'd be looking back. What was my shrinkage plan for the day? How close was I to that shrinkage plan? And it's not just a daily oversight, it's weekly oversight, monthly oversight, etc., etc. The next one, really important, average handle time and the variance of average handle time. So many times I have walked onto contact center floors and I've got one agent that will be delivering an AHT of 100 seconds. And on the flip side of that, you've got other agents that are running at 2000 seconds. Well, what model is going to be sustainable with that level of AHT variance? And what, as the operational team and a training team as well, coming together to work together, how do they close the gap on that AHT variance so that it gets to a much more predictable performance offering? Because me as an operational owner, I can't blame WFM for the AHT. They just they just generate the numbers, right? I'd also be asking myself the question, how accurate was the interval forecast? What was the contact arrival pattern?
Yep.
Was there a spike in the morning? Was there a spike in the evening? Were we on track throughout the day constantly, or has something special cause been chucked into the mix, which has thrown us off course? And the final one, but it's not the final one because there's millions of
There's
different
one of many kind.
permutations here.
Yep.
Um, I asked myself as an operational owner, have I got the right people that are properly trained to do the job, not just focused on product, process, policy, and systems, but actually handle contacts? And are they in the right place at the right time?
Yep.
And if I measure that through the whole schedule adherence piece, because only if they're following the plan can I really say where the issues are.
So let me just build on a lot of what you said. One of the things that I'm a big fan of is accountability frameworks, right? For WFM as part of the operations team, and obviously for the operations team specifically in terms of things like average handle time, adherence to schedule, shrinkage, and what have you. But at the end of the day, it gets back to the team sport, and you can't blame any one party without looking at the data in comparing your actuals to your plan. That is so critically important. And there's a lot of platforms like Cinareo, for example, that will allow you to ingest actuals and compare it against your capacity plan across all the inputs, all the outputs, and what have you, right? Having that, and this is why I love operations management and contact centers. It's so numbers driven. You know where the issues lie. If the volume's higher than expected, lower than expected, if average handle time's higher or lower than expected, you know who, right? If shrinkage is higher or lower, you know exactly who, what, where, when, why. Was it a function of planning, or was there a snowstorm and people weren't able to get into the office, or there was a virus running through the center, and yada yada yada, right? So everything is measurable, right? And the beauty about contact center operations is what it's measured gets done. The question is, how are managers managing their people to the numbers, right? Recognizing there's a human factor to all this, and it has to be done, through coaching and mentoring with empathy, et cetera, right? But at the end of the day, you can't argue with the numbers, right? You
Yeah.
just need to
Yeah.
be able to
Totally agree.
understand those numbers and with variance explanations.
I was
And
going to
and
say
just
it's all about the numbers, but being able to understand what the numbers mean, right?
Absolutely. And I think as well, it's not just a WFM and operations team sport. I've mentioned training earlier on about
Recruiting.
Mm.
well, that was going to be my next one,
Oh,
recruitment.
sorry, sorry,
Have
Daniel.
we recruited the right people, right? Because I've I've gone into another contact center previously, and the spotlight was well and truly on operations. Well, it wasn't actually on operations, it was on HR. What are you doing to manage attrition? We've got more people leaving the business than we've got coming into the business. Well, start at your recruitment funnel, right? Are you profiling the right people that are suitable for the contact types that you're trying to manage? It's not a stack 'em high, sell 'em cheap setup. If you do that, you're just going to lose.
Stack
And
'em
and
high, sell 'em
I
cheap.
I like that analogy.
but
That's
I
it's
a
love
great
doing.
it.
analogy.
How many times do you see
Yeah, yeah.
people just bring more in? We'll cut the training time by 3 days. We'll get them live earlier, blah, blah, blah.
There's
And
fog in the
then,
mirror. They can breathe. Yes, but
uh,
what about performance?
yeah, and then you look at the people that they hire, and I'm talking for really complex retentions calls, right? Where you've really got to get to the crux of an issue. And then when you do a bit of digging, you find out that the people that they've hired don't even have the confidence to order a
Mm,
Chinese takeaway over the phone on a Friday evening. And you're like, this just does not make sense. You've got to profile people properly, train them, bring them in with the right profile, train them properly, nest them properly, put them through
yeah.
grad bay, whatever it is that you're doing, before you transition them across to operations in a properly managed process. And also,
So
And
let's
Daniel, I
yeah.
mean, it's absolutely key to that end that you're constantly monitoring the demographics in the community you're operating in to
absolutely.
determine whether or not there are sufficient resources available, or if you've outgrown that location, and then have to look at, moving work to another setting. And I've done that when I was in BPO operations, looking at opening new centers and constantly monitoring the community and in fact looking at other communities so that in the event that I need to grow, there's other prospects on the horizon.
Totally agree.
So so let me jump in then and let's start talking about what executives actually want. So when we think about what they actually want, why is it so hard for planners to give leadership numbers that they can actually act on? So Daniel, do you want to tackle that one?
So there's a few things that they want. They want silence. They don't want the contact centers to be causing them problems. That's the first one, right? But they want predictability. They want clarity. Um, they want ROI visibility. Is it actually generating return
Mm,
on investment? They want balance across cost, service level, and customer and employee experience. But the challenge is not what they want, it's how will you actually deliver all of that.
mm,
And it's no small task, right? It's really, really difficult because all too often, especially the less mature contact centers, they seem to be only focused on one of those
mm,
components. But the true mastery is where you're able to balance all of it, and you listen to what comes out of the contact center, because it's one of the most untapped resources that any business really
mm,
has to get the sentiment directly from the customer. Um, but a lot of the time, businesses invest so much in the contact center delivery, but they
mm,
don't use the data that they've got available to them to preempt what's coming down the track, or even fix the process that drove the contact in the first place. But instead, they're more focused on these soft measures from contact center operators, whether they said please and thank you, whether they showed empathy, right? That you're scratching the surface of a much, much broader solution. And but businesses need to have their eyes open sometimes because they only know what they know. but
Hmm.
the untapped potential of a very well-run contact center is limitless in terms of what impact that can actually have on a business.
I
Right.
agree. I mean, one of the things that when I think about um, the contact center as almost a manufacturing type of entity, a call, a chat, an email could be considered a defect. And if you know of the concept of Six Sigma, where you're trying to drive defects out of the business, right, it requires a look at your business processes, right? You look at your people, your process, your technology, the knowledge management processes and what have you, right? And if you think about it as a system, you can very much, to your point, Daniel, look at driving volume out. And it's not just a matter of sending it to another channel. It's stopping those types of interactions from coming in the first place where it makes sense. Don't get me wrong. There's some cases, obviously, in a sales environment, collections environment, what have you, you want to drive volume for sure. But in the service environment, you want to drive them out to the extent possible. And again, self-service is all well and good, but that still means there is a potentially a problem that hasn't been resolved. And so if you think of it from a systems perspective, from a Six Sigma perspective, you're driving defects out. I also think about, um, you know, capacity planning is about risk mitigation. It's about lowering your risk rating and trying to balance the budget with service delivery expectations, right?
So,
And
Mark,
and
sorry, keep going. I don't want to interrupt, but
you just did.
finish your
You
thought.
just
I
did.
know, but now I'm backing up. Backing up. I didn't want to spoil your thought because I had a follow-up question to ask you. But you want to finish your thought
Yeah, well, my
before
thought is probably going where you're going to go. I'm guessing. I'm
I'm
just guessing.
okay.
Be
I'm going towards capacity planning specifically now because you're the guru when it comes to capacity planning, and I want your opinion on how it needs to be reframed. So it's not like just a regular operational exercise, but really as a driver, right? For return on investment, for predictability. I want to know how you would reframe capacity planning specifically.
Well, I really appreciate that question. Not that I knew it was, didn't know it was coming
Yeah,
or what have you, but to me, capacity planning is not just an operations exercise. We talked about it being a team sport, right?
yeah,
Capacity planning or workforce management is only going to be successful when they interact with other parts of the business, whether it's operations, the finance group, training, recruiting, and what have you, right? Capacity planning is in part a financial control mechanism. It's in part a CX mechanism as
yeah,
well as an EX management mechanism. And it's really about how you balance and govern the labor dollars that convert into service performance. And there's multiple stakeholders that need to be involved, right? Different
yeah.
lenses. So if we think about our CFOs, right? CFOs want predictable spend, right? They want to know that, they want to see what the cost of operations are to achieve a given outcomes, whether and maybe there's different tolerance bands and
Mm,
there's different opportunities to improve financial forecasting and accuracy and budget confidence by better managing all the different inputs that go into managing contact center operations. From a COO or operations perspective, it's about operational efficiency and agility, right? Strong capacity planning allows CEOs to flex staffing and or outsourcing strategies, in fact, to ensure that they're not only providing and achieving a service level on a weekly or monthly basis, but down to that interval level. So we're getting service level consistency. So no matter what time
yeah.
somebody is contacting you, you're getting the same level of quality service. At the
And
end of
how
the
Staying
many
day,
stand up.
at the end of the day, it's about improving decision-making confidence for all these roles.
Totally. Yeah,
And how
yeah.
many times have you been in a business whereby it comes to budget time and the CFO says, we'll take the spend from this year and we minus 10%?
Hmm.
They don't even ask the people that have the power to be able to forecast this. And it's those people that should be involved, the WFM team should be involved in a contact deflection strategy or an optimization process across the year. It's not take this year's spend and minus 10%. And maybe I'm being too generous at that 10% because I've seen it at 20% and even
Hmm.
higher previously. But the WFM team are experts in this predictability piece, at least start your budget process from what the reality is likely to be, and then you can discuss the art of the possible. It shouldn't be an imposed upon process. They
Absolutely
should be
agree.
involved.
Absolutely agree. I think part of the thing is we've seen it as you said, Daniel, time and time again when organizations say, we need to be budget conscious, we need to optimize, yada yada, yada. And usually optimize means cost reduction, not right sizing. That
Mhm.
is staffing to the level you need, right? But at a minimum, workforce management plays a key role in communicating what the implications are of reducing your budget by 5%, 10%. What is that going to mean in terms of CX, right? Degradation of service level, increase in average speed of answer. What is it going to mean in terms of EX from an occupancy perspective and having the agents work 95% in any given hour and the potential implications to attrition, right? These are all critical factors that, workforce management I think, and I've written white paper on this before about the strategic role of workforce management, right? It is a strategic decision-making tool, right? And as such, you're elevating from a tactical type of role to a strategic role to achieve the desired corporate objectives. And to me, it's as simple as that.
So let's ask everyone another question, if we can. And that is, if you could improve just one piece of your WFM process, what would make the biggest impact on you and on your organization? And again, Mark and
Ooh,
Daniel, what do you think the answer is before we know? See if you agree on this one.
interesting. I'm almost going to lean towards leadership, visibility, and ROI. I don't know.
I I'm gonna say something different just because I don't want
Okay.
to agree with you. Although I would have said the same thing, but I'd say execution alignment.
Execution alignment. That was my second one.
Okay. Okay. And again, if anyone answers other, we want to know what the other is. Okay. So you guys, even though you kind of agree on the number 3 and number 4, we'll see what the actual answer is from
Is this the
everyone.
last poll? I want to know if I'm going to win the
I
beer.
think this is the last poll. So yeah, so you got to see if you win this one, Mark. See who's right.
Gonna fly over
Execution
to London,
alignment.
Danielle, and you can buy me a beer.
I was hoping to come to Canada.
Okay.
Okay, well, you're welcome to come too.
Oh my goodness. Oh,
Oh,
Mark,
I got
completely wrong.
smoked.
Completely wrong. Daniel,
I'm
you're
so
the winner of
glad I
this one.
changed my answer.
Okay. Or you both would have been wrong. There you go.
Yes.
Boom.
So interesting. So yeah, not leadership, visibility, and ROI.
So
Executive alignment came out on top.
leadership has no responsibility for effective execution of WFM. Good to know, folks. Good
Yep.
to know. It's just
There you
all
go.
about operations, not executing our plans. Okay.
Execution alignment. Very interesting. Well, I love these polls, honestly. It's really interesting to see what people think. But what I'd like to do is open up the floor to any questions that anyone might have. So one that I'll ask right off the bat while people are thinking about questions they might have is early warning signs. Apparently, people are interested in knowing what some of the early warning signs are that the data feeding into the workforce planning might be compromised. And how can planners specifically fix these before costs start to escalate? So if one of you want to tackle that question in terms of early warning signs.
I can jump in if you like, Mark.
Of course.
I would say volatility in
Okay.
the expected numbers. So peaks and troughs in places that you wouldn't expect to see peaks and troughs in the data, and having to make large alterations to your staffing plans on a regular basis. I would say that there's a problem there.
So just along that lines, I think we talked about uh, operations being all about the numbers, right? And being able to monitor the numbers because it's so readily available. There's probably more data available in contact center operations than most other industries, right? So looking at variances along with what Daniel said, right? If there's increased usage of overtime, if there's a forced reduction in non-production shrinkage, such as training and coaching, which really, should be sacrosanct, but in many cases is sacrificed because we don't have enough people because our volume has increased and we need more people. Service level variation, degradation, chasing service level throughout a week. These are all signs that we've got a problem, Houston, and we need to address it. And so that's where you need to, if you think about workforce management as a life cycle. You've got gathering and analyzing data. You've got forecasting, capacity planning, scheduling, intraday management, reporting, and then that all feeds back into gathering and analyzing data. Maybe your data is wrong from the beginning. And again, we talked at the very outset about data, historical data not being the panacea. You need to understand it, but you also need to think about, what did you miss in your forecast planning, right? In terms of what changed. Was there a new line of business that was introduced? Were there legislative changes that came into play? Was there a weather event or any other thing, right, that you really need to examine closely?
Well, Mark, I know we were discussing before executives having numbers they can trust, right? Like you're trusting the data, like these are the numbers. If someone is starting to standardize their capacity planning process, what's the best first step in building these numbers that people can trust? What's a logical first step?
Well, I kind of just alluded to it. It really is having a clearly defined process for gathering and analyzing your data.
Okay.
Know where your data comes from, trust your data, and if you don't trust your data, why don't you trust your data? Right? I mean, the systems, the CCAS platforms, the workforce management platforms that are in place today, they're all about tracking the numbers, right? And if there's a problem, what is wrong with that data, right? Be sure that you understand that and have confidence in your single sources of truth of that data. And again, it's not just about volume metrics, it's about average handle time, shrinkage factors, um, all the shrinkage factors, planned and unplanned, in office, out of office, and what have you, et cetera, et cetera.
And also back your numbers up with science, right? Overlay your customer numbers by month, right? Can you
Hmm.
then from your contacts that you've received, can you then work out a propensity to call profile, a ratio? Because if you can't, what's driving your forecast? Is it taking the view of the CFO where you take last year's number, you minus 10%, right? Or are you actually building it off of a solid case to be able to predict? Is your outbound call uh, forecast the same? Have you got a ratio? Are you noticing fluctuations in that ratio? What could be driving fluctuations in that ratio? Are you even including outbound calls in your forecast? Right, because all of this needs to be baked in and considered, but it shouldn't just be getting a balls in a bingo machine, turning the wheel, whatever number gets spat out, that shouldn't be your forecast. And obviously, I'm making light humor of this, but
It's so
sometimes
true.
that is what you see.
It's so true. Look, I've seen silly bugger games being played as well. And by that, I mean, for example, if I don't like the service level that I'm seeing, I will change the formula. I will eliminate uh, God, the word's gone out of my head. Abandonments calls, right?
Yeah,
So I artificially inflate the denominator to make the service level look better.
yeah,
That's not solving the problem. That's masking the problem, right?
yeah.
But all too often, I've gone into organizations and see exactly that happening, right? Let's change the rules of the game. Let's not play the game. Let's change the rules.
So one final thing I want to do before I'll give everyone a little bit of time back. I want to kind of throw you both a curveball here and ask you both I'm sorry, I didn't tell you this in advance. I want to both tell you if someone had to walk away from this webinar with one key takeaway, what should be that one key takeaway that they should not forget? What is most important that you want them to take away from this conversation? So, Daniel, you
Am
go
I only
first.
allowed one thing?
What is the one thing? I know there's probably 10 things, but what is the one thing that everyone should walk away with understanding?
In understanding, or I would put my focus and effort on making sure that the WFM teams are trained and you give them the right seat at the table. From at a strategic level, start including them in the conversations and give them the voice to challenge the
Mhm.
operational teams and the rest of the business.
And I agree wholeheartedly. I'll just add and reiterate what I'd said earlier about it being a team sport. There are multiple
Yeah.
stakeholders in achieving operational excellence, right? Workforce management is a key component of it. It's a strategic component of it, and it requires operational execution, flawless operational execution, and they go hand in hand.
Yeah, and it has to be in a team. You can't work in silos. Yep, agreed. Okay, well, on that note then, I will say thank you very much to both of you for participating in this conversation. I'm hoping everyone that participated had some really great takeaways from this conversation. Everyone's going to be getting this deck. Please don't forget to send us feedback in the feedback forum when this session is over. We really value your feedback, and we're hoping you attend our next session. And feel free to reach out to either Mark or Daniel at the end. You'll get their contact information in the deck. And we want to thank you very much for joining us today. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.